Is John Keogh from the Australian Financial Review. John, thanks very much for your time. We'll begin with, well, one of the takeouts from Scott Morrison's speech yesterday, this big focus on gas. This is somewhere the coalition's gone before. It's previously been Angus Taylor talking about the moratoria placed on gas, Victoria having one entirely, and New South Wales reluctant to go down the coal seam route as well. Why would it be successful now, I guess, if previously the states held out? What's changed?
Yeah, well, I understand Victoria, their moratorium notionally ends at the end of June this year, Tom, so they're considering lifting that. Not sure if they actually will, the Labor Andrews government down there. And New South Wales is currently going through an approval process for the Narrabri proposed gas project as well, and they're making sort of positive noises about that. I think it's run by Santos, or proposed to be, and some other potential projects around the states. So Morrison really egging on the pressure on the states. And to be honest, he has a fair point, doesn't he? Because Australia has this massive gas resource in the ground. We're facing sky-high gas prices, and yet we can't pull the stuff out of the ground. It makes absolutely no sense.
Well,
I mean, my time in the US...
Well, I'm just going to say in particular to transition, if you look at Victoria, it's a state that has always had a lot of brown coal, the highest carbon-emitting way of getting energy. And it's not just a moratorium on coal seam gas, which does have issues, particularly around water, and there are always concerns about water use for that, but even just conventional onshore gas. That's the thing that has a lot of energy experts scratching their heads there.
Absolutely. And look, we do need to be, careful with the health and safety and the water regulations around this. Look, my time in the US taught me that sometimes the fracking boom over there could be a little bit too deregulated, not enough sort of regulation. But I must admit, like, their gas prices over there are so much lower because they have allowed a lot of drilling onshore there, and Australia could be in a similar position. Now, we can't go straight from coal-fired power stations straight to 100% renewable energy. We do need this transition fuel, and gas seems to be a sensible one too. It's not completely, obviously, low emissions, but it's lower than coal. And this would be sort of one piece of the jigsaw. Let's not kid ourselves it's going to solve all our energy problems overnight, but it would be a small step, and probably a positive one if the states would actually get on board. Yeah,
it's great as a peaking power. It can be switched on almost instantly compared to coal. The emissions, look, roughly 50% fugitive emissions come in there, but look, your points are all pretty solid ones, I think. So part of the puzzle, maybe the easier part for Scott Morrison. Interesting to hear him talk about electric cars. It wasn't so long ago that Labor had its electric car policy. Remember what it was for 50% of new vehicles by 2030 to be electric vehicles, so quite a way out. And that turned out to be the same as what was in the government's not so loudly announced plan within the Department of Environment. But at the time, Michaelia Cash was calling it the war on the weekend, and we're coming after your ute. But now it's, well, we'll see what their policy is. Now it's a good idea, apparently.
Yeah, the rhetoric has changed a bit from the election. I think they were saying it would cost an extra $5,000 to purchase certain larger vehicles, particularly utes for tradies and things like that, and really sort of trying to snatch some of the blue-collar sort of working-class tradie vote from Labor, and it might have had a little bit of success there. It's interesting, though, because I think the industry here who imports these cars for some years has been looking for some certainty around the electric car rules. Because there is a perception we have lagged the rest of the world. And the unfortunate thing about that might be is that if the rest of the world sets the standards, they get ahead of us, and therefore whatever rules we take in place now might be too late for the car producers overseas to actually produce them to our standards, and we might actually get stuck with whatever sort of standards have been set by the rest of the world. And I know the industry here has been lobbying the government about that for some time.
And remember, we don't have a car industry. It used to be a concern that vehicle emission standards would hurt that. Well, what they do now is just mean that we get cars that, guess what, use less petrol, and I don't think people worried about the price of petrol would be concerned about that. Anyway, interest rates, the inflation number's a bit better than we thought yesterday. I mean, better might be a bit of a simple word considering we're talking about food going up because of drought and bushfire and petrol going up as well, but a little bit more than expected. Basically, February, no chance of a rate cut, but I guess going forward, is there a chance we'll just sit where we are for a few months now and it's a wait and see?
Well, you'd have to say the main pieces of economic data in the last few weeks for late last year have been surprisingly better than expected. We've had good November retail sales. Now, that might have just been because of the online frenzy in November, but then we've had 2 months of falling unemployment and strong jobs growth to 5.1%. Look, there is still some uncertainty about the economy, high debt levels among households, consumers. Are they really going to pick up their spending with still pretty modest wage growth? Perhaps not. But it's probably enough signs for the Reserve Bank to see that gentle turning point they've been talking about. And unless something really happens bad with the coronavirus or something like that, maybe sit on their hands for a couple of months and just see how these 3 interest rate cuts from last year work their way into the economy. Because they do typically take 9 to 18 months to have their full effect interest rate cuts. And maybe we're just starting to see a bit of a positive sign there. I don't think we're going back to the races of 3% economic growth, but probably we're pulling out of the worst of it.
That will be the hope, particularly ahead of the budget. John, the final topic, this is the thing you've delved into so I don't have to, which I'm thankful for. Loophole listed funds, or listed funds and a loophole within that. Josh Frydenberg is possibly going to close that. Break this down for us, dumb it down for me. What are we talking about?
Yeah. So Frydenberg put out a press release late on Monday, the public holiday, saying he's having a review into these commissions that are able to be paid to financial advisors and stockbrokers for selling listed investment vehicles. Now, it's interesting because 5 years ago, the Coalition created a loophole for actual commissions to be paid for selling these products. Now, they've performed very poorly compared to the rest of the stock market, and ASIC has been privately warning the government that this loophole should be closed. I've revealed that in some Freedom of Information documents that were published in January. And now Frydenberg, reluctantly I've got to say, has yielded to pretty severe pressure from the media, some commentators, and also the exposure of this ASIC FOI to announce a 4-week consultation with the industry to see whether he'll close this loophole. Let's not forget it was Labor who introduced the Future of Financial Advice laws that banned virtually all the commissions. Then the Coalition recreated this specific loophole, and so Labor's Stephen Jones is really going after Josh Frydenberg hard on this and demanding immediate action.
Well, there you go. The ground is set. We'll see what happens. John Keogh from the Australian Financial Review. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tom.